You know, I had just recorded a 1 hour and 20-minute long video talking specifically about this subject, and then while I was listening to the audio that I had recorded, I realized that it is way too long and does not convey the point that I really wish it tried to convey. And so I'm going to start again, but instead I'm going to try to record these videos in series, and hopefully I don't end up making the classic Techmo mistake, which is just forgetting about it. And with that out of the way, let's get started. This video, as you can probably tell by its title, is specifically about enshittification, and the process of enshittification, and the enshittification of tech. Now, if you are not necessarily in the spaces in which people are talking about enshittification, then let me give you a brief introduction to what enshittification is. So, enshittification, as defined, is essentially a process in which you, as a service provider, provide a good service in the beginning, right? And then slowly over time, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And a great example of this is something I'm going to be talking about throughout this entire video, because that's what the episode is linked to: Microsoft and Microsoft products. More specifically, Windows, Office 365, and Azure, and a bunch of other different services that Microsoft offers. And you might be wondering, Techmo, what do you mean when you talk about the enshittification of Windows? Well, if you were born before the year of 2007, then it might be pretty difficult for you to understand what it was like, because you grew up in the middle of the enshittification process. I would honestly debate, unless you were born in 2010, right? If you were born in 2010, which was around the time that Windows 10 was slowly starting to be phased in as an idea, then you might not be aware that you were kind of born in the middle of the process. So, let's talk specifically about Windows. Before we get into anything else that Microsoft has enshittified, let's talk specifically about its biggest product, Windows. Now, Windows is an operating system. I'm not going to get into what operating systems are. It's essentially every single part of the user interface that you utilize with your computer. It's the front end, the back end. It's essentially the thing that you use day to day whenever you get on a computer, right? Or a phone. Phones also have operating systems. It's essentially the core tenet of what makes everything run on a user level. That's an operating system. And obviously I am speaking very, very generally here, right? I understand that an operating system is way more than just that, but for the layman, that's probably how you'll understand it. But I digress. Enough talking about what an operating system is. Windows is an example of an operating system. It is an operating system that has existed for decades now, and it has been iterated upon multiple times. Now, you could get into the debate with like MS-DOS and Windows 9X and Windows NT, but that is a discussion for an entirely different time. And if anything, that's kind of what like brought the peak of Windows, was Windows NT. So I think the best way to talk about this enshittification process is to ask specifically about UI elements first, before I get into the inner workings of Windows. So, when it comes to UI elements, right, whenever you think of Windows, and it doesn't matter which version of Windows you started off on, unless you started off on Windows 11, but real ones understand this. If you started using Windows back in 1995, when Windows 95 first came out, and all the way up to Windows 10, how would you rename a file? That was easy. You would right-click on the file, or honestly anywhere in the bounding box of the file, which, if you highlight over a file, it's that little blue square that appears. Anywhere within that bounding box, if you right-clicked and then you left-clicked on the property that said rename, you would get there. And you would just be able to type in a name and then boom, it was easy. It was super duper easy to rename a file. And with Windows 11, I cannot believe I am about to say this. In the year of our Lord 2025, the year I turned 24 years old, I cannot believe I am about to say this, but there was a learning curve with Windows 11 just because they decided to change that specific UI element. So let me give a little bit of an anecdote from my job. So, we had Windows 10 on all of the computers at my job. I'm not going to disclose where I work, but we had Windows 10 computers all over the place, and suddenly Microsoft had pushed an update, and that update updated most of the machines at my job to Windows 11, but they were all on a broken image of Windows 11. You see, the Windows 10 image was kind of deprecated, and the Windows 11 image that my IT department at the place that I work at was, they were working on a new Windows 11 image, essentially. That's what was going on, and during the process of the Windows 10 to Windows 11 update, something broke on the back end and it revealed a bunch of security flaws. Now, here's the thing, right? Is that I held on to that version of Windows 11 for the longest time and didn't talk to it. I didn't talk to my IT department about it because I had a computer that performed really, really, really well. It worked. It functioned. I didn't want to get rid of that. And with every single headline that I had read about Windows 11 at the time, I knew that getting a new image would not be a good thing. Sure, it would fix some of the security vulnerabilities that would probably leave me to be a little bit more liable at my job, but I had a computer that actually functioned. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but I was dreading the day that I had to swap over to this new Windows 11 image. And with the current Windows 11 image that was deprecated, that was built off of this deprecated branch of the Windows 10 image that was updated, I was basically using that as a test bed to learn Windows 11. And I have to say, it was like pulling fucking toenails. It sucked. I hated it. It was disgusting. It was terrible. I don't need to use any more adjectives to describe how honestly horrific Windows 11 was to learn how to use. From its dumbass fucking centered start menu and taskbar all the way down to the way that you rename files. And this is where I have to get back into the renaming files bit. So like I said earlier, you would click anywhere in the bounding box, you would right click there, and then you would go down to rename, and then you would rename the file. Well, how do you do that in Windows 11? Well, when I first started using Windows 11, I didn't see a rename option. And so I went to another thing in the context menu that said show more options. And when I went to this show more options button, it showed the old Windows 10 styled context menu. And I sat there and I said, wow, you just added an extra layer of inefficiency just to make my life slightly more difficult. Go fuck yourself, Microsoft. That's what I had said. Now, I sat there and I thought to myself, I'm like, well, surely there's gotta be an easier way than this. Surely I don't have to go into show more options to pull up the old context menu, which should have just been there from the start. Let's be honest here. It should have been there from the start. But I essentially started using the Properties tab. I started using the Properties tab in this new shitty context menu that I really didn't like. And if you don't know anything about the Properties tab, you can rename the file in there, but you can also accidentally delete its extension. So whenever I would rename a file, sometimes I would accidentally delete its extension, and then I would have to go back and then re-implement the extension, and it was a pain in the ass. It was a genuine, real pain in the ass. And I had been struggling with that for about 2 months, right? I had been struggling with that for about 2 or so months. And then I was talking to a friend of mine on Discord one day, and I was venting to this friend of mine about every single individual problem that I was having with Windows 11. And do you want to know what this person said? Do you want to know what they had told me? They said, "What do you mean it's more difficult to rename a file?" And I said, "It's just more difficult to rename a file. Like, I don't... Surely you've used Windows 10 in the past, right?" And the thing is that they had started on Windows 11. They had been a console gamer up until this point, and they had basically just started on Windows 11. And so I asked them, I'm like, "Hey, okay, so if you know what the fuck is going on here, how do you rename a file?" And they said, "Well, it's simple. Techmo, it's really simple. What you do is you right-click on the name, and then you go up to the top of the context menu, and then you click the icon for rename." And that's where I got super confused. I sat there, and I thought to myself, and I was sitting there thinking the entire time, I'm like, top of the context menu, rename an icon? There's an icon for renaming now. And this led me to figuring out that the way to rename a file on Windows 11 is, yeah, at the top of the context menu, there is a small square that has the letter A in it, that has the little marking for highlighting text. Yeah, it was a little icon that depicted a text box, but it was right next to the Copilot icon, and it was right next to another icon that I honestly did not give a fuck about. And so, I sat there, thinking to myself, why the fuck would Microsoft do such a thing? Why the fuck would Microsoft go out of their way to make something that was precedent for 30 fucking years, 30, and then change it to something entirely different? Let me use an example that isn't Windows, right? Let me use an example that is, I don't know, what's a good example? An air compressor, right? You're using an air compressor, you need to fill up your tire, right? So you get an air compressor, and obviously there's the on button, there's the light bulb button, and there's like your little pressure gauge, right? So imagine you get this air compressor, and your old one had broken, and you were like, "Ah, shit, my air compressor broke, but I need to fill up my tire. But I have enough tire to get over to the grocery store." So you get over to the grocery store, you get your new air compressor, you go into the parking lot of the grocery store, and you get ready to use your air compressor. You look down at your air compressor, and instead of there being an on-off switch, and a light bulb, and a pressure gauge, there is a bunch of random buttons that do different things. It's by the same company, but the air compressor looks so different that you're just sitting there thinking, how the fuck do I use it? And you don't want to press every single button, because you don't know what every single button does. One of them could be the fucking play music through the air compressor button, because sometimes, I don't know, that just random things can be implemented into random things nowadays. And so you're sitting there thinking, okay, well, there's no clear markings. There's no clear, like, there's nothing, like all of these are new hieroglyphs that I'm gonna have to learn. And then you ask a person who walks up, and they're like, "Hey, I see you're having trouble with the air compressor. Let me show you this." And you notice that the on-off switch, it's not an I/O, which is something you're used to. It's not the little circle with the line in the top of it. It's not that. No, 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 no. The new on-off switch is an X with a line through it. And you sat there, and you looked at that. You looked at that, and you said, "I have never seen this symbol ever in my life be used to depict on and off." and then you use the air compressor. And at that point, now you know. Now you just know that that's how shit works. Now, I have to say this, right? We haven't developed new air compressor technology forever. And I would almost say the same thing with Windows. Windows fundamentally as a platform has not changed much since Windows 7. It really hasn't. And when I say fundamentally as a platform, I mean its core functionality. It really hasn't changed that much since Windows 7. Or honestly, if you wanted to get even further, you could technically say Windows Vista, but I'm not going that far. It really hasn't changed that much since Windows 7. So, you have this precedent of renaming files from all the way back in Windows 95 that everybody has gotten used to over the years up until this point in which people are being told that they are forced to switch to Windows 11 because Windows 10 is just no longer being supported. How fucked up is that? Like actually, how fucked up is that to the end user? Because to me, what that actually indicates is just an unwillingness to be transparent about anything, right? To me, that's getting rid of a certain level of honesty that Microsoft had. It really is. Because again, you set a precedent for 30 years, and that precedent is not changed. There was no reason to change that precedent. And then all of a sudden, when Windows 11 releases, you just make a worse version of that same system, and then you make it so that way if people want to go back to the old system, they have to go out of their way to go back to that old system that worked, that actually functioned. I honestly don't fucking get it, right? And by the way, that's only one problem with Windows. I spent basically 16 minutes discussing one problem with Windows 11 as an operating system. Now, before I discuss any other further problems that I have with Windows 11 on a fundamental level, I am going to roll back a little bit and talk about Windows 10. And despite the fact that I love Windows 10, and despite the fact that I am a huge fan of Windows 10, and despite the fact that I'm still running Windows 10, I can't help but feel that Windows 10, and honestly no, I would go back as far as to say Windows 8, Windows 8 was the real start of the enshittification process of Windows as a platform. Now, going to Windows 10, right? Going to Windows 10 specifically, because I don't want to dwell on Windows 8. It's already been through enough. I don't need to talk about the fact that they needed to release a Windows 8.1 because of how bad that was. But I digress. Look, Windows 10 was probably the real start of the enshittification process. Now, Windows 10, right? Windows 10 started off not so great. Essentially like the same forced update bullshit with Windows 11, where they really tried to get everybody on Windows 10 and it didn't work. It really didn't work that well, up until probably about like 2015. So, Windows 10, right? Windows 10, trying to install Windows 10 in the year of our Lord 2025 is fucking abysmal. It really is. So, installing a new version of Windows 10, unlike installing an older version of Windows 10 and then just going through and updating it, right? Just using a media creation kit is horrible. So, you create your Windows 10 image, you put it on your computer, you start installing this Windows 10 image, and then it installs all of the software and stuff that you need. Now, I would say that you would install software that you need, except most of it is bloat. I'm going to go through on my Surface Pro real quick. My Surface Pro. I'm going to go through and I'm going to I'm going to name every single process on there that's just straight unnecessary. Alright, I am now on my Pro, and I am going to go through and list every single thing on here that's unnecessary bloat that's just automatically downloaded whenever you go onto Windows 10 as a fresh install. So let's take a look here. I don't need this feedback hub. Xbox Game Bar, that's not necessary. The HP Display Center, that might be necessary. The Mixed Reality Portal, I don't see myself ever using Mixed Reality on a fucking Surface Pro. that seems pretty detrimental. OneNote, I didn't ask for that. Outlook, I didn't ask for that. Phone link system, I didn't ask for that. Skype, that's deprecated. I don't even know why that's on there anymore. I have honestly no fucking clue why that's on there. The Xbox console companion, I don't need that on here. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Copilot, I don't need that on there. I don't know why Windows 10 decided that it wanted to install. I don't know why it decided that I wanted Copilot. It just decided that. It decided that for me. Let's see, what else? OneDrive, I didn't ask for that. OneNote, I didn't ask for that. If I wanted that, I would have downloaded all this stuff. Cortana, that's deprecated. I know Cortana for a fact is dead. Here, let's try to open up Cortana. Let's see what happens. Oh, Cortana in Windows as a standalone app is deprecated. It's just bloat. It's just bloat. And it's bloat that you can't get rid of. I didn't ask for this Microsoft Store thing down here. Learn more about this picture. Let me click on that real quick. What does that do? Just clicking on it once. Oh, you don't even like double tap it. No, clicking on it once just opens up Microsoft Edge and tells you about your wallpaper. It's shit like this. You know what? And that's not even going and looking into the toasts. That's not even looking at the toasts. Okay, well, it looks like, honestly, it looks like that's actually completely normal. There's no, yeah. So, look, the point that I'm trying to make is that I just listed off, right there, a bunch of random shit that I don't need, that doesn't affect me in my day-to-day life, but it's just put on here. Why? Movies and TV? What the fuck is the difference between movies and TV and the media player? Is this LinkedIn? Is this a LinkedIn app for Windows 10? What the fuck is this? It's installing LinkedIn. I didn't ask for that. Stop. No. Okay. What is this? There's just a bunch of random shit in here that I didn't, like... Yeah, both of those don't exist. Can I just remove them then? I guess I'll just remove them. Like, you shouldn't have to look at a new install of Windows 10 and be able to see every single thing that shouldn't have been installed with it. And honestly, I'm probably gonna go out of my way to uninstall all this shit. To uninstall the Xbox Game Companion. Why? Because I'm not using a fucking Surface Pro for gaming, or the Mixed Reality Portal, or Cortana, or Copilot. I don't need any of this. And I wish that we were just back in the day, where you would get a new instance of Windows 7, and you want to know what you would have? You would have Internet Explorer, even though, honestly, listen, get rid of Internet Explorer. I know that's completely deprecated, but, like, whatever, right? Just any fucking browser. Firefox, Google Chrome, just give me a web browser, give me the recycle bin, and tell me to go nuts, okay? It's, like, just setting up Windows in and of itself in this day and age just comes with a bunch of meaningless, random fucking bloat that you will never ask for, and I can only imagine what it's like for Windows 11. Downloading a new instance of Windows 11 without a custom image from your job, I cannot fucking fathom what that experience has to be like. And then going through and then trying to update it to the most current possible version, because, I don't know, you need that most current possible version to be able to do, like, one specific thing and to make sure that you have the most up-to-date security features. It's a pain. It's a hassle. I don't get it. I don't get why Microsoft thinks that adding a bunch of random fucking bloat makes the operating system better. Because it doesn't. It really doesn't. And the fact that I had to question whether or not there was a fucking LinkedIn app on a Surface Pro, that's abysmal. I'm sorry, that's just abysmal. Okay. So, that was Windows 10. Again, I can't even imagine what this has to be like for Windows 11 as a first-time setup. I can't fucking imagine. And I guess this has been a problem since Windows 8 as well. Again, I'm not going into Windows 8. It's irrelevant. It's always been irrelevant. Nobody cared about Windows 8 even when it came out. Look, this has been a problem for a while. And something that I also think has been a problem for a while is the search indices. So, if you're unfamiliar with the search indices on Windows in general, right? Let's go all the way back to Windows XP. So you had Windows XP, and keep in mind, I do use Windows XP every once in a while to run very old or deprecated software that requires a certain operating system to run, right? So I sometimes do use Windows XP. And the thing about Windows XP is whenever you would look for a program, it was essentially a game of figure it out yourself, dumbass. We'll give you a bunch of like pop-out windows so you can figure out where your program is, but you have to know where you put your shit. And okay, fair enough, right? Fair enough. If you are using a computer, you should know where your files are. And I'm going to be a little bit honest, I do use the search function. However, something I do want to mention is whenever you do use the search function on any sort of platform, more specifically anything past Windows 7, it sucks. So Windows 7 introduced a search feature for your File Explorer and for your Start menu. And essentially what it does is you go in, you type in, I don't know, example.pdf, and it'll bring up every single thing that you had any sort of search indice that had either PDF or example, and normally example.pdf would just be at the top of the list because that is an exact match for what you were looking for, right? And that's typically how the search indices on Windows 7 worked. And the thing is that ever since Windows 10, and this is where I say Windows 10 definitely started a trend of enshittification. Windows 10, let me go to my main computer and not my Surface Pro. Let's type in, I don't know, what's a game that I was playing recently? Wild Assault. Okay, it brings up the app, but it also brings up, okay, there's the .rar for another file that I have, and then underneath that, there's a Bing search result. And the fact that it uses the internet for its search indices, or let's say that I'm looking up, I don't know, Adobe, because I do have Adobe programs on here. Well, I guess that's a bad example, because I do have a bunch of just random Adobe programs. So the point is that every once in a while, it'll try to just use Bing. It'll just attempt to search the internet and be like, this isn't exactly what you were looking for, but here's a close approximation of what you might be looking for. And that sucks, and I don't like it, and I never asked for it, and I honestly don't know why they decided that that would be a feature that people would want. I don't know. I don't get it. And it kind of sucks. And I don't know. That's all I could really even say. Again, that's legit. All I can even say is, I don't fucking know why this exists. Why do I have this? If I wanted to search the internet, then I would have opened up a web browser, but I specifically went to the Start menu and tried to use an indice search in the Start menu because I didn't want to use a web browser, because I know it's a file I have on my computer. It's things like that. That right there is part of enshittification. And again, Windows has been getting enshittified for a while now. It really has. And those are just 3 examples that I'm going to use. This next example, and okay, before I even go on to this next example, pointing at other things that show the enshittification of Windows, here is a compilation of a bunch of headlines that just show Windows 11 being the worst fucking thing imaginable.
Do not engage.
Okay, and now that I have finished that part of the video, I'm going to now talk about another anecdote that I have from myself at my workplace involving that Windows 10 and Windows 11 image that I mentioned earlier. I told you earlier in the video that I was going to get back to the Windows 11 image and how awful it was, and how awful trying to set up a new version of Windows 11 is. So, let me tell you about the setup that I have at work. So at my job, I have a laptop, right? I have a laptop, and it has a dock. And it is a company-owned laptop and a company-owned dock with company-owned monitors. Everything that I have for this setup is company-owned. It's all property of the... It's all workplace property. And the thing is that this version of Windows 11... So... essentially, the IT department at my job took my laptop. They said, we're going to re-image this because it has a deprecated image on it. And I said, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And they took they took the laptop. They took a few hours to re-image it. They came back and they said, all right, your custom image for Windows 11 is finished. And I got back to my office right after lunch, and that's when they gave me the laptop. The same machine, by the way, same machine, same identifier, same everything, except it was a new image of Windows 11. That bastard of an operating system, I swear to God. So I start working on my Windows. I start working on setting up Windows 11, and I'm like, okay. Well, I understand I don't have administrator access on my workplace, so I'm going to try to work within the bounds of what I can work with. And the thing is that... So, here's the thing, is that I have a hearing disability. I have a problem with my hearing. And every once in a while, I'll be able to hear good out of my left ear, and other times I won't. And on some days, it's more severe. On other days, it's less severe. And essentially, I have to constantly have my eardrum drained because my eardrum is just enlarged and it doesn't drain any fluids. So I know that might be a little bit of TMI, but I wanted to clarify because I do actually have a hearing disability. And that's not including the tinnitus that I have in that ear. So, keep in mind, I already have a hearing problem. So, something I like to do is I like to set my audio on my computers and any sort of devices that I have to mono audio. So that way I can be able to hear everything that is output from my computer. And... so I go into the audio settings and I look around and I'm like, hey, there's no audio devices. That's weird. There's no Audio Tech HD or like Realtek Audio HD driver. There's none of this. And so I sit there and I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I guess maybe they just have a new audio driver just right out of the box. And for a while, my dock was not outputting audio, and it was becoming very difficult to try to figure out this problem. And so I just say, fuck it, I'm going to put some headphones in and hope for the best. And no audio was coming out of those headphones. Now keep in mind, I need headphones at my job to answer the phone, because we use an app at my job called Ring Central. And it's essentially just a phone in your computer. That's it. You can use it to dial other phones, whether it be landline, other Ring Central, or cell phones. You can just use it to call phones. It's a phone. It's a phone! That's all it is. It's just a phone. And I need my headphones to be able to answer my phone at work. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, what if I just go into the settings menu and I try to tweak something? I open that goddamn settings menu up. It's the worst. It's the fucking worst. It's laid out worse than the Windows 10 one. And then I go in and I try to go to the audio settings. It soft locks. It freezes the fuck up. It just completely freezes up. And I'm sitting there waiting. Okay, maybe it'll not be soft locked here in a bit. 7 minutes later. And it goes to the next settings window. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe it was just trying to allocate resources. Maybe it was just trying to do something. And I click on another setting. It decouples my audio devices and my dock. And then it just sits there soft locked for another 7 fucking minutes. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is not a problem with my computer. I know it's not because it's run Windows 11 before and it never had these problems in that version of the settings menu. And so I'm sitting there and I'm just thinking, I'm like, oh god, it's going to be a pain in the ass to set up my headphones. It's going to be a pain in the ass to set up equipment that is necessary for me to do my job. And by that point, like I said, it decoupled my audio devices, and I sat there and I'm trying to go back into another instance of the settings menu. I kill it using Task Manager. I open up the next settings menu, and then I go in and I try to find display devices, and guess what? It does the same thing. So I wait the 7 minutes, and then it asks, would you like to see wired connections or Bluetooth connections? And so I look around and I'm like, well, duh, I want wired connections. It's a dock. It's a laptop dock, so I can, have my laptop docked so I could use the 2 monitors that I have at my work, at my job. I click on look for wired connections. And do you want to know what it pulls up? It pulls up a Bluetooth TV. It pulls up Bluetooth devices and says we are trying to sync with these devices. A stable connection has been met. And then it asks if I want to use a TV to display my monitor in a separate building handled by another department. I nearly crashed out. In fact, you could debate that I did crash out at work. I was so fucking pissed. Yeah, I asked for wired connections. You pull up Bluetooth connections. All the Bluetooth connections are televisions, and you can't recognize the dock that's wired to the laptop. The laptop can't communicate to the monitors, and now my audio is also acting fucky. So I left a long-worded support ticket to IT, basically saying, my image is more fucked up than it was previously. And I get it, the security features are nice. You need security features for proper OPSEC at the workplace. I understand that. You need good cyber security. I don't fucking care if I can't use the computer that needs to be connected to the internet in the first place. I don't fucking care if there's nothing on my computer that I can use that would require that level of cyber security. And keep in mind, right? Keep in mind, it shouldn't be, this type of shit should not be acceptable. This should be considered unacceptable. And I can't blame a lot of people for switching to Linux or for staying on Windows 10, or in some cases, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, buying a Mac. I cannot believe the person, me, an ardent Mac hater, is saying that they don't blame people for swapping to Mac. It's actually genuinely disgusting and atrocious what's going on in the tech space right now, and the enshittification of all of this technology, because that's what it's called. That's what this term is. Enshittification. The enshittification of tech is getting to a point in which, like, I don't fucking know, man. I honestly don't know how we allow ourselves to say that these are acceptable standards. I've heard of bugs that I would never even imagine would happen on a Windows 10 machine, and I have friends who ask me, and they're like, hey, Techmo, could you help me out with this problem? And I'm just like, I don't fucking know, because you're using Windows 11. I don't know what Windows 11 is doing. Windows 11 is a broken piece of shit operating system. You think I know what the fuck that's doing? And oh my god. Dude, like, automatically syncing everything to OneDrive, like, I don't know, man. I honestly, I don't know. And, again, Microsoft is one of the pinnacle examples of the enshittification of tech. Microsoft is the pinnacle example right now that I can point to about the enshittification of technology. Anyways, next, I don't know what company I'm honestly going to talk about next, because they all have similar problems. But honestly, Google would probably be the next one that I talk about, because Google, just Jesus fucking Christ, man. Jesus fucking Christ. Oh, I also gotta say, whenever Azure goes down, it, like, impacts half of the fucking internet. That's awesome. I'm so glad that, like, all these massive data broker websites and services, I'm so fucking glad that, like, one service can go down for, like, a day, and, you can't use the internet. Jesus fuck, dude. This is what I'm talking about when I say there's a genuine problem with the enshittification of tech. Anyways, like I said, that's all I have for today. I'll probably talk about Google next. That seems to be the next one that it seems to have all these really big problems. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Techmo, out.